A lot of people think they have feelings, but the truth of the matter is the feeling has them. Have it be okay for life to be out of your control. If you're into approval, you're going to have the experience eventually of loving that achy place in yourself which didn't get the approval the first time around.
Hi, both of you. Hi, Gay. Hi, Katie.
Hello, Soph.
Hi, Sophie.
So good to see you. It's funny because I started the call and I was like, I want to talk about self-love. And you said, I want to talk about mass and space. And I said,
And I jumped in and I said, well, let's talk about both because they're both intimately related.
Well, please tell me more about mass and space. Start us somewhere.
Well, I first want to say that when I first met Gay, way back in 1980, one of his, his concepts and worldview that was so intriguing to me had to do with, are you really a mass body, an energy body, or a space body? And all of the technology around what we call Newtonian, Einsteinian, and third way, Gay started talking about when I first met him, and we've been exploring it for decades since then. And so I thought, I bet people don't really, have an introduction to that. I mean, I know you wrote about it in Conscious Living, among other places, but I thought this would be a great thing for people to, to expand their consciousness today.
Good. And being this time of year, of course, love is always in the air. And especially, I think a lot of people understand now that your ability to love yourself determines your ability to love other people. Mm-hmm. And that's a big mystery that we're unfolding right now. So, yes, well, what I was getting at is that everything in the universe is made of three different things. It's either mass, it's stuff that's compressed together, like this meaty stuff in our bodies and our bones. Mm-hmm. So at one level, we are mass beings. And then there's a second level, energy, where you can become aware of fluctuations of movement in your body. Mm-hmm. You become aware that your energy is kind of rushed into your chest when you feel sad. Or I was just reading a text from a friend of mine who burst into tears at a certain point in the movie Wicked, and was relating that to her own life. And so energy rushes up. So we are all energy beings in the sense that we have this energy in us that moves around. And if we know a lot about that, that really helps in life, because then, when energy rushes to your shoulders, you say, oh, gosh, I must be angry about something. Or when energy rushes to my belly, I must be scared about something. So if you learn to read that, it becomes a very useful thing. What most people don't know much about, though, is space. So mass, energy, and space. So mass, stuff together. Energy, bzz, the stuff that animates the stuff.
In between.
The buzz in the meat. And
getting your buzz in the meat.
Yeah. And then this third level, though, the space level. Well, what that really means in practical terms is the moment when you know enough about, let's say, your grief. Let's say you're focused on liberating grief from out of your body. Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that happens is grief from this lifetime. But then if you open up a little bit further, you realize that you're the repository of ancient grief, like stuff that came down from your mother and your grandmother or your lineage. In my case, and in many people's other cases, my grandmother never got over losing the Civil War.
The war between the states.
The war between the states. She would never call it a civil war, but that would indicate
that alone is
civil war
interesting.
between two warring factions of the same country. And she said, we were not the same country. But anyway, her life was dominated by having lost the war.
Yeah.
And so she carried this grief in her body until the day she died. And it was in the 1960s when she died, so human beings had gone from the Civil War to space by the time her lifetime ended. So when you study any kind of and begin to feel any kind of thing in yourself that you want to transform, it leads you into one thing after the other. And you finally, you move through your grandmother's stuff to a kind of a collective feeling that engulfs humanity oftentimes. So what I'm getting at is that riding waves of energy and learning to ride waves of energy does this other thing to you. The ability to do that means that you're no longer identified with the fluctuations of the energy. You're identified with the space in your body in which the energy occurs. And so that becomes a very treasured moment. And I can remember that happening for me. The first time it happened for me, I was 24 years old. And I went from being completely identified with my body, but not in a good way, because I weighed 300 pounds at the time and I smoked 3 packs of Marlboros and I was in the most horrible relationship. I can't even contemplate that kind of pain anymore.
Don't.
I'm going to have to go lie down. Anyway, at that time, I was in so much pain because I was so identified, I think, with resisting my body. And as I began to open up to all of that, I had this peek at it. When I was 24 years old, I had about 2-minute escape. I fell down and I escaped. It didn't knock me out, but it knocked me kind of out of my normal way of thinking. And I could see this huge symphonic panorama inside myself of anger, sadness, grief, sexual feelings. But I came to this place of pure consciousness after I felt all of that. And I realized, I'm this pure consciousness, as we all are. But I'd never seen it before because I'd never gotten unstuck from all my body traumas long enough to actually feel it. And so there I was in this moment with this incredible space washing over me. Well, like all things of a transitory nature, I came out of that in about 2 minutes, but it left behind this element of wanting to live that way all the time.
Yeah.
The first thing I had to do was amend my diet. And I started eating only things that I believed and felt had that space in them.
And also energy had a
kind of a benign energy or preferably space. And I'll tell you, the first thing I found were blueberries, and I'm still fixated on them here 60 years later. I love blueberries. And the first thing I found I could eat after I came out of that experience that had enough space in it was blueberries. And so I lived on them for 3 days and I lost 10 pounds.
I was going to say, how many pounds did you?
Wait till the universe hears about this.
The blueberry diet.
The blueberry diet. But anyway, I learned actually to tell the foods that I could tell would either leave me with a kind of a spark of good energy or a feeling of more spaciousness. You'll find those out for yourself, everybody. But many of them lay in the vegetable realm, which I had never encountered before.
What's that?
This thing of broccoli, I think. But anyway, I learned to love vegetables and fruits as a result of that because they had so much space in them. And the more I ate them, the more spacious I felt. And the great value carrying around moment to moment, being a space being, is you can feel all these things. I can feel all these things happening within me, but I don't need to take them personally anymore.
And you're not at the effect of
I'm not at the effect of them. It's the moment where you go, a lot of people think they have feelings, but the truth of the matter is the feeling has them because when they're in the grip of it, they lose,
Whatever freedom.
whatever they've learned in the latest self-help book goes out the window. And 60 years of transformation can go out the window just because I didn't get my beer delivered on time. God damn it. That doesn't happen around here.
I was going to say, really? They have the quote from Ram Dass, like, if you ever think you're enlightened, go home for Thanksgiving. That's really good. Or for Christmas, that this moment.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the terrible thing is now about being in my 70s that everybody that used to trigger me pretty much is dead. But the only
Well, that's one solution.
That's one solution.
Just kill them. Just kill those people.
that now it leaves me with absolutely no reason to blame them for it. That at a certain
Well,
point,
that doesn't stop most people.
that doesn't stop most people, but I still find myself, the only person I find myself still arguing with is my mother, who died in 1990. But
they can still live inside us if we haven't created space around that interaction.
Yeah, I think there's still this little part of me that believes that just once I'd like to win that argument.
Well, if it's in your head, technically you can make the argument go your way.
Yeah. So it's a brief introduction to mass, energy, and space. And the reason I think it's so important for us to learn that as human beings, it sounds like a thing you'd learn in physics, mass, energy, and space, but practically applied to your body, you, like all of us, are made of stuff, but then the energy that flows freely in that stuff, many people compact that and push it into places it shouldn't be by, let's say, repressing their grief or not dealing with it in anger. Like I transformed, one of the most amazing things, I saw an instant transformation of a guy that had gone around all his life being angry about everything. And I pointed out to him that it was all about sadness and disappointment. And suddenly, right there in front of me, his life changed. Wow. And so that's the way life will change, because energy can be transformed very quickly if you know how to deal with it. But it's stuff we ought to learn in the first grade, like when you're sad, don't distract yourself from it. Take a few moments to find out what you're sad about.
Feel it.
I'd feel it. Let yourself feel it.
Experience it and turn toward it and give your attention.
And same thing with anger. I've invited, I don't know how many thousand people in my office at one place or the other to take a moment and just savor their anger, feel it. It's dominating your life. Just feel it. And you know what they'll often tell me? So I've never done that because I feel like if I do that, I'll be in such a rage for the rest of my life that I'll never be able to get anything done. But it's interesting that it's the exact opposite of that. The moment you embrace it, and here's where we come to love, because the deepest level of compaction in ourselves can only be revealed by love. That's why Rumi, 1273 or whatever he lived in, anyway, it was a long time ago, but he said, the steering mechanism of God's love, the steering mechanism of God's universe is love. And that's how you find your way through the universe. And haven't you found that to be absolutely true? You come to a place in yourself where the only thing to do is love it. Right. You can't fix it. You can't replace it.
You can't get rid of it.
Get rid of it.
And I would say that's probably, and you and I have had conversations around this, certainly with Katie, but I would say when people ask me, like, what's the diet, because I've lost, as you have, so many pounds, it is an act of self-love. Like my bite that I take or not take comes from, is this an act of self-love or not to eat this particular thing? And I would argue that certainly has had more effect on my becoming a body that I feel so wonderful in, has come from this food is not going to make me feel good. It's like, it's not like I wouldn't give it to my child. So why would I give it to myself, right?
I've seen pictures of you back then, and I literally would not recognize you today, and you wouldn't recognize me.
No, same.
We went to my 50th high school.
I wish we had reunions in France. We don't. I wish.
Yeah. Well, our evening was one person after the other coming up to me.
Who are
like,
you?
Know me, and then saying, "Geez."
Gay. And then calling across the room, hey, everybody, that's gay. That's gay Hendrix.
Wow.
And then also having the experience of the guys that, he played football with, who were all, very buff, looked more like Gay did back then. So there was a big switcheroony.
Oh, yeah. I didn't recognize my high school quarterback. When I'd seen him last, he was a 150-pound superstar quarterback. Now he was a 280-pound.
Well, I'm really, if you can drill with this with me, because I just went to a wedding in France, and some of those people had not seen me 100 pounds ago,
Wow.
So, but I was trying to tap into, like, I felt proud a little bit. I felt like not exactly F you, but kind of like now, like all these women that kind of like treated me like these young women that would not invite me because I was the fat kid, and now as quarterback, similar.
And,
Yeah,
and now
compared-
your
oh.
gorgeousness.
Yeah. Compared to, well, just a second. The question I want to know is, how long have you been skinny compared to how long were you fat?
Life, like years. Oh,
Yeah.
I've been healthy looking. I don't call it skinny, but healthy looking the past 10 years, particularly this past year. So most of my life, not, I would say.
Okay.
You've been
So
healthy
10
longer.
years
than
of
me.
healthy,
Yes.
40 years or whatever it is of,
Yes.
I forget how old you are, but anyway.
Yes.
Okay. That means that there's this vast territory of stuff that the loving of it, loving that person you were afraid to take to the wedding, loving that person is such a rich source then of juiciness for you. The more you can open up, because that's how you become a space being. The more you open up to embrace, because to embrace is not just to hold the other person or yourself, but to also hold them in a way that they feel more spacious. They don't feel contracted as a result of your embrace.
Really being with at a deep energetic, but also at a space level. And as you were talking, I was feeling my breath expand to be able to create the space in which all of that can occur.
That's the great thing about it. I've known Katie for 44 years.
I know.
To watch her evolve into this.
And you, to watch you as well.
Entity. It's been so fantastic.
And it's been the mass energy in space, playing with that has created this journey of discovery that's just been always enthralling, even though it's been all of these years, to realize if I'm feeling in a funk, that I'm caught in mass. And that, because in mass world, there's always opposition and there's always friction, and two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. And so if I'm fighting with myself, I go, there's something there, there's energy here that I'm contracting. And what would happen if I just opened up to that and let the energy move through me? And then the energy, when that moves through, what that creates is more space. That it's almost too like it activates what I think in meditation they call the witness. That I'm able to experience, to see what's going on, to feel what's going on, but I'm not caught in it. That's a really a miracle move.
Yeah, and that just takes a lot of practice. When I learned to meditate, they said, don't worry about the fact that you have a lot of thoughts during meditation, because meditation works like dyeing cloth in the old days. You dip it in, you go in for a half an hour, and you come up and hold it up to the sun, and it's the sun that makes the color fast. And then the next day you dip it again, and you keep doing that for 30 days in a row, and you got a solid fabric that won't
like a leak.
What do you call it?
Well, leak would, but
fade. Yeah, when you dip it.
30 days of dipping and it won't fade.
Well, yeah. So you dip it and then it fades, and then you dip it again and it fades. So it's really about.
So you're saturating the fabric.
Yes, you're saturating your cells, your interactions, your choices.
Is that where it comes from when they speak in self-help? Sometimes they'll say like a habit, it takes about 30 times or 30 days to change the habit. Is it a similar process then?
Yeah, I think it is. And if you remember, Jesus is reported to have said, somebody asked him, how long does it change?
Does it take you?
You know, and seven, and they said, no, 70 times seven.
Oh,
So,
a lot.
it takes a long time to transform a habit.
At the same time, when you were describing this person who transformed in front of you from his anger to not, sometimes change is just like that. Like you get a different consciousness and it just shifts. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the beauty of human beingness is spiritual awareness, spatial awareness doesn't have to proceed linearly through time. You can have a big wake up when you're 24, as I did, that then saturated the rest of my life. And I had to get the rest of my life into harmony with it in order to be happy because I'd seen who I wanted to become. And then it was a question of getting rid of those 120 extra pounds that was between me and who I really was.
Yes.
And also the flesh is slower. So we can have this transformation experience like you did, and then getting it into the mass is the one that takes practice and because we're denser, at a physical level. And so I think people, can get discouraged because it might seem like it's bouncing off or nothing's really changed. And, I felt great yesterday and today I feel, all gritchy again. But it's the same process of turning toward giving your loving attention to being with what is occurring at that energetic level and feeling, experiencing. And then what I found over and over again is that it opens up not just space, but new choices, new perspectives, because if I'm not in the soup of, the world is really different if I can expand, organically expand my experience of it.
Mm-hmm. When you spoke of the slower pace, I was remembering when I first experienced my motorcycle. As you know, I ride quite a machine with my Harley. And sometimes the acceleration, not having a car around me, I have this experience of like my body is over there or my something is over there. But I have this experience of like, wait. I kind of need, it's almost I'm out of my physical body. And it takes a moment, like almost like in a cartoon, it's like
to get back in your body again. Yeah. I think that's what people experience also, perhaps on like roller coasters.
Yes.
You get the energy. I think that if people are not generating energy inside, that they can enjoy, they're going to try and seek it outside. And I think that's part of our adrenaline addiction is that we're not letting love propel us. And so adrenaline takes over in that, no, which is very draining rather than renewing.
What's beautiful is as I was getting on the call with you two, I was with Abby, our producer, for a second, and I've had quite a morning, not dramatic, but it was very chop, 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 go, go, go. My brother had a little bit of an emergency, as he often does. God bless him. He operates in that world a lot. So I jumped a little bit to help. I got on the call and I said to Abby, and it was like, a minute before you both came on. And I said, how do I really want to be in my heart in this moment. And Abby guided me to this beautiful thing, and it helped a little. But I have to say, the second I sat with you, that's the other thing we can do for one another, is the second I was in your presence, it's almost like my elevator just dropped in a good, in a beautiful, it was just like, there I am. It didn't take, it looked like it could have taken a lot because I was really agitated, but the second in your presence, so maybe we could almost become forces of that for one another, like almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I mean when I say I'm holding space for you. That I'm actually feeling space so that you can go through whatever energy bounce that you need to go through.
Yeah. Wow. Since we kind of wrapping up somewhat, although we have time, I'd love to hear your practical, when you say the embracing and like if I walk around in the world and I get triggered or something is getting me a little bit, like the breath, I heard to come back to my breath and my heartbeat. What else can we suggest to people that can, because it sounds like when you spoke of meditation, it's a preventative measure so that when the thing happens, I'm more, I don't know, fluid to what's happening on
Yeah, it's like training.
Yeah.
It is like training, yeah.
Yeah,
And there are a number of practical things you can do, though. One is to have it be okay for life to be out of your control. Because a good many of the things that make people anxious on the energy level are trying to control things that they cannot possibly control. And so the body is trying to figure out, how the hell do I control how my mother feels about this situation, And your body's going crazy because your body's wired for solutions. And if it can't come up with a solution, and if you go around feeding it thoughts about things that it can't possibly solve, you're going to have anxiety.
You're going crazy. You're literally driving your body crazy. And
yeah.
And you're asking it to do something that's not possible to do. Control whether this airplane falls out of the sky. People are in there with white knuckles and grim faces trying to.
That was me for many years.
Yeah.
But
So
it is
what
possible
is
to
that?
overcome that.
What does that look like? I get on a plane and I feel oh my God, I'm going to be trapped in midair, which, could cause, like what does, like that, huh?
Well,
If you have a husband that loves you, you say, take a few moments and feel that fear rather than grabbing the airplane. Just let yourself feel that. Ooh, wow. Go all the way through it. Let the plane fall out of your grasp, And after a while on an airplane, she got so that she would be sitting there reading while the airplane took off.
In fact, I was able to fall asleep on an airplane, which Day is not able to. But I want to give you all, and anybody who has fear of flying, you also gave me a mantra many, many years ago when I first started flying.
Yeah.
And it is, I am willing to learn any lessons that I might by this plane's crashing from wisdom rather than experience.
Oh,
that's my airplane.
Could be applied for lots of things, huh?
It could be applied for lots of things. But whenever I would get on an airplane, I just put my hands on on the sides of the seats, and I would repeat that to myself. But then I would also drop into, how am I feeling about it right now, and be with that. But that was you assisted me to let go of things that I couldn't possibly control. And so that's one thing that you can definitely do.
The second thing, I want to hark back to this conversation we had about love, because love is really the ultimate healer. And anybody that says otherwise hasn't had the experience of healing something with love, because at this stage of the game, I had thousands of experiences of it. But the first time I had a personal experience of something disappearing from my body that I'd always been trying to repress simply because I went the other direction and allowed myself to feel it. That's miracle time for, it certainly was for me. And here it is in relationship, because a lot of people come into relationship with wanting to control the other person.
Yes.
And that's a lot about being right. And have you ever been in a relationship with a person who really needed to be right? Most of us have, and most of us are serial predators. We'll go out of our way to find those kind of people at a party and take them home. And if they're controlling enough, we'll even marry them. And so the other issue that a lot of people come into relationship with, in addition to control, is approval. They really want the other person to approve of them
because they won't.
They haven't got to that place of love themselves. And so if you're into control, eventually you got to drop being right like it's a hot potato and just feel what it's like to not be and not to be right. I know, I've been there many times. And if you're into approval, you're going to have the experience eventually of loving that achy place in yourself, which didn't get the approval the first time around, and now taking over the agency over your own approval and loving yourself and approving of yourself. Those are both miracles.
I love those. It's interesting because as you're describing that, I also know you cultivate a world of appreciation where we do appreciate one another, but it sounds like it's the cherry on the cake, not the cake. It sounds like you're not giving it to the other person so that they don't feel not approved of.
To suppress something. So it really is, what I was just thinking of is that giving attention to open space rather than to what's wrong, I think is another big move that we can make to move into energy and space. Because even if I'm, feeling, really mad at somebody, there's some part of me where, I'm breathing, there's some open space there, or there's some place where my muscles are flowing and I can actually experience the flow of energy. And when I give my attention to that, I actually am breaking the pattern of that contraction and pushing through.
Yeah. Why do you think we need to be in control so much? I've never really tackled that so directly. Like why? It feels like it's a very common addiction almost.
It's deeply wired in because a lot of people, when the earth starts shaking, grab for something solid to hold on to.
Right.
And, at the purely physical level, people will grab for the door frame or they'll grab. I remember teaching Katie how to ski.
Oh, God.
Her solution to tipping over when she got off the lift was to grab me and then
I just
both fell
down at once.
8 people are down on the ground. And so that's the tendency, is to reach out and grab something that we think is solid. In my case, it wasn't solid. Then we apply the same thing to spiritual things too, where people reach out and adopt some loony belief just for something to grab onto.
This is the way it is.
Yes, conspiracy theories abound on this planet.
Well, it's another way of being right.
Yeah, it's another way of being right. You're
But
right.
why do we need to be right so much? Like, what does that?
It controls fear. It's a short-term effect.
It allows us to avoid fear because it doesn't really work. I mean,
It's a mini dose of heroin. It takes away your fear for a moment.
I see. Or the illusion.
And it comes back even more.
Yeah, it comes back even more.
Yeah.
But the alternative then, and again, we're back to love, because I feel like the antidote to control and fear is love. Yeah,
exactly. Well, you go back and dig out your original Swamp Thing comic books, because how to deal with swamp things in the comic books gave me a metaphysical lesson I'll never forget, which when Swamp Things comes out of the swamp, you can't get him back in the swamp by letting him overpower you or
with fear.
With fear. What you do is you find the place inside that's your own inner swamp, and you love that inner swamp, and he recedes back into the swamp.
Wow.
Now, there is actually a comic that's called Swamp Thing, and Swamp Thing
to find this. Yes.
And what was occurring to me too, on a very simple, practical level, is that loving is being willing to be with, to be in the same space with. And so if I can have just a couple of seconds of being with my fear, that liberates, it changes the physics of it, and it becomes energy and space and that presence. And presence and love and appreciation, they're
the same. They're the same energy. Yeah. Wow. And I wanted to talk about self-love. We back to that, but we certainly.
Now you know why you want to talk about self-love.
We did.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Well, I'll come back again sometime and we can dissect.
We love you. We love having you always.
Well,